It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Monday edition of the show. Hey, thanks so much, everybody, for making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a big part of your workday. Hope you had yourself a great weekend. You chilled, you did some work, whatever happened on the farm or the ranch. I hope it was productive, and you're ready to take on another week here. We are into the first full week of May, and as the calendar always shifts into May, this is where we move from, it's early in April, no worries. This is when people get a little bit antsy, want to get going, and thankfully so, on the Western Canadian prairies this week, we got an opportunity for some moisture, so we will take that, absolutely. In parts of Eastern Canada, based on kind of what I saw, it's still a little bit wet and showers still rolling through, and they could do without it. They want to kind of get started with some of the planting, get some more corn in. So it's, kind of a regular May here right now. Absolutely. So, hey, today on the show, we are going to talk. We got three guests today. We got Jeremy Boychyn from Alberta Grains. He's going to talk about cutworms. We got, is there ergot-resistant cereal varieties out there? We're also going to talk a little bit about the new Fusarium head blight map. We're also going to hear from Pete Johnson today, as we usually do on Mondays. So Pete's got a bunch of stuff we want to talk about, including a big breakthrough potentially when it comes to biologicals related to algae. We're going to talk about that. As well as first-timer, newcomer to the show, we got Martin Carr, who's with Winfield United Canada, and he's going to talk about nozzle selection when it comes to sprayer. He's with Winfield United Canada. He's their agronomy specialist or agronomy manager for Western Canada. So looking forward to having Martin on the show today, too. And we'll also have time for the top ag news stories of the day here on this Monday. Lots happening around the world when it comes to agriculture and some of the things that are happening as it impacts our industry indeed. Now, if you have any feedback on today's show, we'd love to hear from you. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can also find us across all the different social media platforms. As well, you could call the RealAg feedback line. That number is 855-776-6147. I'm broadcasting today from Vancouver, British Columbia. I'm in town for a meeting that I'm taking part in for a client. Looking forward to that. And I was able to spend the weekend in Kamloops, British Columbia, which is, kind of, there's a lot of ranches. It was really cool. Like I said this last week as we were flying into Kamloops. It was very neat as you're flying out. It was kind of a clear day and able to see all the different hay fields and the ranches as you're making the trip to Vancouver. So Kamloops is a beautiful area. That whole, it's so nice. But you talk to a lot of locals, and all they talk about is how August sucks there now because of all the smoke from the forest fires the last number of years. So that'd get old real fast. So you're going to finish the end of the week. This is like one of those weeks where, traveling hillbilly. So Wilbury, I should say. Well, maybe a little bit hillbilly. I'm in Vancouver here till Wednesday. And then I guess the show's hitting the road because we're going to go to Bismarck, North Dakota to watch my oldest son play in the NSIC Conference Championship for baseball. That's in Bismarck. So going to be in North Dakota on Thursday and Friday of this week as well. So looking forward to maybe getting a little bit of the countryside and see how people are progressing in some of their planting and things there. So, definitely there's work travel, there's baseball travel, there's a lot kind of mixed in here. Guess what? Next week, I'm going nowhere. I am in, I think, Lethbridge all week, which is really, really going to be cool. And it rained all day here in Vancouver yesterday. And I thought, boy, this is the kind of weather that needs to make its way to the prairies. And it looks like it just might. Fingers crossed, everybody. We're hoping for some rain across the prairies here this week. Let's take a break. And when we come back, we're going to bring in Jeremy Boychyn with Alberta Grains. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147.
Choose Viatude fungicide and unleash best-in-class sclerotinia protection in canola and premium protection against white mold in soybeans. Viatude contains a powerful premix of Onmira Active and Prothioconazole. This unique combo delivers high-performance disease control, crop safety, mix compatibility, resistance management, and advanced mobility for excellent coverage and superior plant protection. Choose Viatude fungicide for stronger, more vigorous crops.
It's now time for a product spotlight, joined right now by the CEO of Seeds Canada, Barry Sept. We're talking about a very important topic, and that is seed regulatory modernization. What exactly is this process that the industry has been so focused on?
The seed industry and seed development have a number of regulations that the seed industry must adhere to. A lot of these regulations were set into place over 100 years ago.
Why should farmers care?
When I got this job as CEO, farmers that I got to know had a number of messages to me. One was, we need access to new technology. We need reasonable cost to seed. Farmers know that there's a significant cost to bringing a variety to the market, but that had to be kept into check. They wanted competition within the seed industry. So those are three issues that farmers need to be, they are concerned about and need to be concerned as this SRM process continues.
Let's get rolling here with Agronomic Monday here on RealAg Radio, and we're joined right now by, he's got a new job. He is a big wheel now at Alberta Grains. I'm giving him a hard time. It is Jeremy Boychyn. Hey, Jeremy, how's it going?
Not too bad, Shaun. How are you doing today?
Hey, good. Hey, so what is this? What new role are you in? You're doing not just extension work on the agronomic side, but now you're research director now too at Alberta Grains?
I am the interim research director at this point with Alberta Grains. So yeah, managing the research side and the extension side, which I'm sure everyone knows ties together very well. Good extension comes from good research, and good research is that research is valuable to producers in the short and long term. So it's good to be part of both of those pieces, and I look forward to the year ahead.
Yeah, good for you, man. Well deserved. Okay, let's talk. Well, hey, weather. Now, here's something we don't say as frequently as we would like to. We've got a chance of moisture in parts of Alberta. It's going to rain, Jeremy, and it hasn't happened yet, so we don't want to jinx it, but Lethbridge looking at about 30 mils of rain on Tuesday, potentially.
Yeah, I think we're all getting pretty excited at the potential of some moisture coming into the dry prairies. It's always don't count your chickens till they're hatched, but I'm certainly hopeful, and my fingers are crossed that we do get this, because my goodness, it'll be certainly helpful for the beginning of this season and get us off to a good start at least, right?
Yeah. Well, hey, before the show, you were telling me that there's reports of cutworms. That this is going to be potentially a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, so just something for producers to keep an eye out for. And cutworms they're a challenge to kind of predict and know that, yes, we're going to get cutworms this year. And, they'll pop up in patches, and some years will be much worse than others, but we really can't forecast the impacts that they're going to have or how present they're going to be. We'll be able to see areas that, if tillage happened in the fall, then it's more easy for them to lay their eggs and we get a higher population in those regions. And, typically we'll see that after a wetter fall where we're trying to work out some of those ruts. And after corn, typically there's a higher risk after corn if we're going into cereals. Those kind of things, we can see those trends a little bit, but year to year, it's quite challenging, but we're already starting to see feeding happening. One actually just east of Calgary in a forage field, and then one closer to Lethbridge. So something for producers to keep an eye out for. And I love the information that Shelley Barkley puts out from Alberta Ag, because she always pushes, make sure you know the species that you're dealing with, Shaun. I mean, this is the important part, right? Get down and start digging and pull those up and identify them, because if you're not knowing what you're dealing with, especially with cutworms, you may be taking management approaches to them that aren't ideal for that specific species. So if we think of something like the army cutworm, which is mainly above ground, it does most of its feeding above ground. We have that threshold of 5 to 6 per meter squared. And because it feeds above ground, if we go to manage it with a pesticide application, we don't have to be as concerned about making sure they're on the surface to apply that. But, you compare that to something like the glassy cutworm, and it does most of its feeding underground. And in those situations, you want to go for the cooler days, maybe closer to the evening, with higher water content when you're actually applying your pesticide. And that allows it to actually work into the soil and get to those cutworms. So it's very important to do that early season scouting when you're seeing it, and making sure that it's not only what species of cutworm it is, but it's actually cutworm. Because I see sometimes, wireworm is popping up in areas that we're typically seeing cutworm, and it's important to distinguish between those two as well.
Okay, good points there. Now, you got a question from a grower in terms of ergot variety resistance. What was that about?
Yeah, this was an interesting question that came out of central Alberta, and we see some areas where ergot seems to be a persistent issue, and we can implement these good rotations and cleaning up headlands and making sure that there's no cereals and ditches at the time of flowering. So the question came in of, should I be looking at specific variety selection? Now I'm talking about bread wheat here. Your CPS and CWRS, is there variety selection I can implement to help mitigate some of this impact? Because although I'm implementing all of these cultural practices to reduce the amount of ergot I deal with, it's still there, it's still present above what I think it should be, and above what's economic for me. It's still causing quite an impact. And at this point, we really don't know, or don't have a grasp on whether there's variety differences with bread wheat when it comes to resistance to ergot. We just haven't done the research, and there's a lot of language around, how long are those florets open? Because we know that ergot, those spores will get into the floret when the plant is flowering, when the wheat or barley is flowering, and that's what causes the infection. And we know it's well timed with moisture around that time as well. So if we have varieties that have a shorter flowering window, can we help with that? And we don't know at that point. So that, falls in the category of both wheat and barley. But it's interesting because it's always, as always, it comes back to seeding best management practices too, right? I mentioned how wide is that flowering window? The wider flowering window, the more chance of infection. This is similar to what we talked about with Fusarium head blight. If we have a low plant stand, Shaun, we have a lot of those late tillers coming in because there's room for them to grow because we have a low plant stand, and those late tillers open the flowering window and extend the flowering window over the entire crop, right? Because we're getting late tillers on almost every single one of those plants, and then those late tillers are what gets infected, and then we see that those higher levels of ergot in the grain at the end of the year. So you'll continue to implement those cultural practices. Unfortunately, at this point, we don't have that variety selection for bread wheat. There is research happening right now in Swift Current, looking at actually durum wheat, and that's been going on for the past 3 years. And interestingly, they just put a durum variety up for registration this past year that actually showed to have, based on greenhouse research, some resistance or increased resistance to ergot. So I think we're heading down that direction. But when it comes to bread wheat, we just don't have that grasp yet as well as barley.
Oh, ergot's the worst.
It certainly is, Shaun.
Yeah, it's just such a pain. Back in my seed plant days, yeah, ergot's I hate dealing with ergot. Okay.
Well, it's so frustrating, right? You do all the cultural practices, and you think, okay, this is the year, and then because you have that population in the soil and the surrounding ditches and the environmental conditions are appropriate, it still takes over. So yeah, certainly frustrating, Shaun.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, we also got a new Fusarium head blight risk map out, right?
Yeah, this is exciting. Okay, so I don't know, Shaun, did you ever look at the Alberta or Saskatchewan? I assume you did look at the Saskatchewan and Alberta and Manitoba Fusarium head blight risk map previously?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, so if you looked and you actually compared them side to side, like where the borders attached, right, between Alberta and Saskatchewan, if you lined up those risk maps, they didn't actually align. Why is that? If you're farming on that border of Saskatchewan and Alberta, or Saskatchewan and Manitoba, and you're seeing that difference, like what's going on there? So each province was really implementing their own kind of algorithm to determine what the risk of Fusarium head blight was. And knowing that this was a challenge for many producers, we were trying to get a grasp and lay on those borders, but also making sure we're consistent across Western Canada for all producers. There was some research put into the U of M, which is Dr. Paul Bullock, who was leading this, through the Integrated Crop Agronomy Cluster. So this is funded by Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, Brewing and Malt Barley Institute, SAS Barley, SAS Wheat, WGRF, Alberta Grains, Manitoba Crop Alliance, and the Prairie Oak Growers. So all of these groups are going, we need a better solution to this. So Dr. Bullock has, over the past 3 years, done a bunch of field testing. I think they mentioned 80 different combinations of different weather patterns, and 1,800 plots over those 3 years. And they've developed this new Fusarium head blight risk map, which is can be found at prairiefhb.ca. So if you take a look at that website, it's actually now one algorithm for the entire Western prairies, or for Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. So you can get a clear idea of what the risk is there. So a big amount of work, investment from all groups, and huge value back to producers, and having that risk map, doubling down with doing those in the field actual on ground checks to confirm that helps producers make better decisions for mitigating Fusarium head blight. So great tool.
Yeah, it seems like
check it out.
Seems like a great example of like common sense prevailing. To be honest, like really, like why would we have individual provincial? Like it should be all looked at from a Western Canadian for the prairie perspective.
Well, you know how it is, Shaun. People start at different paces, and there's a system already in place, and this is where we think it best aligned with our environment, and you get this patchwork that happens, and then, yes, it's the common sense of, okay, we need to bring this together and create some consistency. So great work on all of those parties for seeing that, funding that, and for Dr. Bullock and his team to pull that together and provide that for Western Canadian producers.
Nice. What are you up to this week? What are you doing?
Yeah, today and this week is we're continuing to actually put trials in the ground this year for our plot to farm. So, we did some enhanced efficiency fertilizer trials that went in this weekend. We'll be doing a couple more of those, a couple more seeding rate trials. So those are happening. It's moving fast paced, Shaun. I don't know, where you are down in Lethbridge, things have probably been moving pretty quickly for the past couple of weeks. Where I am, north of Calgary, things are really starting to pick up the pace this week, and next week we're probably going to be, gung-ho and moving. So it's exciting, and, a lot of those trials are hitting the ground. So I'll be keeping a close eye on that and connecting with producers as those trials hit the ground, and continuing to keep my fingers crossed for
rain.
Yes.
Yeah, okay,
yes.
You cut out there. I was like, fingers crossed for what? I'm gonna guess rain. So, yeah, okay, good, I win. Yeah, it's good, I get a prize. That's good, yeah. Fingers, toes, everything's crossed, I'll tell you that. Okay, hey, Jeremy, thanks so much for joining us here today on the show. Really appreciate it, bud.
Thanks for having me, Shaun. We'll chat next time.
That is Jeremy Boychyn of Alberta Grains. Of course, Alberta Grains, also a sponsor of the Wheat School, which you can find by going to wheatschool.com or at the Real Agriculture YouTube page. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio. We got Peter Wheat Pete Johnson coming up next right after this.
Want a product that will give you nitrogen all season long? Then you want to try Envita. Envita gets directly into the cells of the plants, and it's easy to apply, foliar or in furrow. Envita provides the flexibility you need for your farm practices. Whether you want to reduce your nitrogen and maintain yield, or maintain your nitrogen and increase yield, Envita fits your farm. Envita SC formulation is OMRI registered. To learn more about Envita, visit azotic.com. That's AZOTIC.com.
Join us for the Canadian Beef Industry Conference, August 19th to 22nd in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan. spend time networking on the trade show floor, hear from keynote speakers, and take in breakout sessions designed to increase profit, manage your rangeland, and navigate trends. Get up close to advanced techniques and hands-on demos, and kicking it all off is Lamley's Bull event. Proud, sustainable, and innovative, we are beef. Registration is now open. Visit CanadianBeefIndustryConference.com for full details and to register.
Peter Johnson at Wheat Pete, RealAgriculture.com, and what an opportunity! Oh my gosh! You think you can't grow better wheat? You are absolutely wrong. We're going to show you how to strive for those record wheat yields that they get in the UK and in New Zealand. You can grow 150 bushel wheat. I'll show you how.
Catch Wheat Pete's Word every Wednesday on RealAgriculture.com or download the podcast on iTunes or Spotify. Let's keep going here with Agronomic Monday. We got a great lineup of guests today. Hey, do you want to use a PGR in your cereals but no time for a separate pass? Summer is very busy. Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging risk, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your local retailer for more information and to confirm acceptable tank mixes. That is Manipulator PGR. Joining us right now is Pete Johnson. Hey, Pete, how's it going?
It's going awesome, Shaun. It's a bit cloudy today, but the sun was out, glorious sunshine on Saturday. On Sunday, we made great progress, even though it rained at night. Just really spring-like weather, almost summer-like weather here, and things are happening. The cereal crops are so far advanced, it's cruel. I wish we could get in the field and plant more corn, but that'll happen here. We'll get there sometime.
Yeah, that cereal crop is early, so that means we've got to stay on our toes, especially when it comes if we're cutting some of that crop for hay.
I can't believe it, Shaun. The very first cereal rye, winter rye, call it what you will. We planted it last fall. It's, an annual or a winter annual crop. The very first field that I'm aware of got cut yesterday, Sunday, May the 5th. And you just say, that's stupid early for Ontario. Are you kidding me? But it's at the boot stage. And if it's at the boot stage and you're trying to make milk out of it, you're almost late. You almost want to take it at flag leaf stage. So, yeah, we continue to be this at least 10 days, probably 2 weeks ahead of normal. Normally, we'd think about cutting the rye crop about the 20th of May. Instead, it's the 5th of May. And across the board, winter barley already in head. So typically kind of a 40-ish day window, 35 to 40 days between heading and when we would see crop maturity and potentially harvest. So that happened on the 3rd of May. You add 40 days to that, and that would mean harvest might happen in the middle of June. It's crazy. And the other thing that's really important right now is we need sunshine and cool temperatures because this wheat crop, my wonderful winter wheat crop, is in the critical phase in many fields, not in all. And I got to be careful because I'm talking about kind of London and that area. When you move north, it's not nearly as far advanced. It's maybe a week ahead at most, and maybe only 5 days ahead. And there's some real big regional differences happening. And I really think it comes down to February temperatures and how much snow you got and just where that shook out and exacerbating those differences. We see them every year, but this year they look like they're wider than normal. But we're, 2 weeks before heading to 2 weeks after heading is the critical phase for winter wheat to make yield. We need sunshine. We need moderate temperatures. We have the long days. We want that wheat crop to be going flat out.
Yeah, interesting how it can kind of sneak up on you, right? You get those certain kind of conditions, and the crop gets even a little bit further ahead than even you maybe had predicted or once thought. Hey, now, I saw a tweet on the weekend. You and I were sharing this back and forth. Very, very interesting. It's from Chenna Prakish with Ag Bio World. Now, he tweeted out, after years of work, an international team found evidence that a once independent nitrogen-fixing microbe has become a permanent resident within algae cells. This seemed like a big deal. What does it mean, Pete?
So it's the holy grail, Shaun. We're always trying to find ways for crops to fix their own nitrogen. If you look at wheat, if you look at canola, if you look at corn, what's the number one expense most of the time? Right behind the cost of the seed, it's nitrogen fertilizer. If we could figure out how to get the crop to be like a soybean crop or an edible bean crop or an alfalfa crop and make its own nitrogen, and best if that's free living, because if the plant has to feed it a lot of carbohydrate, a lot of photosynthate to get that synergy to work, then the yields drop. You can only get so much photosynthate from the sunshine. So this microbe that they found in the algae, fixing nitrogen for the algae, if we can pull that out of the algae and get that to work in other crops, it could revolutionize the industry. Now, that's been the holy grail, Shaun. So Wheat Pete is not saying that because they've found this that we can do it. It's way more complicated than that. But no, it's a big deal. We are really hopeful one of these days we're gonna hit the jackpot and make all this work.
Yeah, very, very fascinating. The other thing that he tweeted was taking a look at, and this is actually mind blowing, is the yield increase that we have seen with strawberries over the years. Now, I know that that's not a common crop for a lot of our audience, but it does show you what, like, genetic improvement, what it can lead to from a results perspective. And if you were to ask people going back to, I don't know, 20 years ago, and said, what's the genetic potential of strawberries? They wouldn't be saying, I don't know, I think we could probably have yield growth of 2,800%. No, they wouldn't. They're not saying that in the 60s. And if you go back to the 60s, that's been the increase in strawberry yield since 1960 is 2,755%. That's incredible.
So, Shaun, it's more than incredible. It's almost in the realm of unbelievable. And it's not just the genetic component. It's all part of what we talk about as the green revolution. So it includes better pesticides to make sure that we control the disease and the insects, and fertilizers to support those kind of yields, and hybridization. I don't know if you get wild strawberries growing in your lawn, Shaun, but here in Ontario we do. And you look at the little tiny wee strawberry that it grows, and you kind of say, man, that's hardly worth picking. It's almost like an elderberry size. It's just tiny wee thing. But it's also hybridization. And so strawberry, we all know that corn is a hybrid. Huge gains from hybrid corn. Well, strawberries are also a product of hybridization. I didn't realize this. I'm not a strawberry expert. But the gain from that hybridization, that hybrid vigor in strawberries is unbelievable. Plus, they made them day length insensitive. So I talk about winter canola and how Mercedes is revolutionizing the winter canola industry, at least in Ontario, and it sounds like in many other places as well, because it won't bolt in the fall like all the old varieties used to. And when it won't bolt in the fall, I can actually plant it on time. I can plant it on time. The plant can get big enough. It survives the winter. And now it's a viable crop versus something that is so hit and miss that I just walk away from. Well, guess what? We have these hybrids in strawberries as well. And then they make them day length insensitive. We made the canola. Either it needs vernalization or it's a day length sensitivity thing. The strawberry, we make it day length insensitive, the way that winter canola used to be. And guess what? Now, instead of one crop, it yields strawberries for the entire season. And the yields just keep going up and up and up. And in the paper, Shaun, it actually said that in some cases, the yield increase could be calculated at over 6,000%, depending on, what species you used as the baseline. And it's like unreal, but we can do awesome things if we put our mind to it and we get these opportunities.
So it begs the question, because looking back in hindsight, it is very interesting, and this is phenomenal information. If we were to think ahead from this point forward, is there a crop that has the greatest potential for yield increase from this point forward, based on what we do know as potential tactics? Like gene editing is one, for sure. There was a big registration last week in Canada, and that news in that regard, but. Is there a crop that we could make, maybe not 2,800%, but it'll look differently in 60 years? Does one come to mind?
Shaun, that is an awesome question, and I don't know that I can jump to the answer. I know that when we try to hybridize wheat, we can do it, but our yield gains aren't nearly as significant as they are in a crop like corn, right? And that's because the corn crop, we can self it. Well, the wheat genome already is a hexaploid, right? It's 3 different parents. So we already have this hexaploid wheat, and that means that it's already got quite a bit of hybrid vigor built in. So when we hybridize it, we don't get these big yield jumps. When I try to think of what's out there that we could see massive yield gains from, I'm just not sure. I'm not sure what that crop is.
Very interesting. And if somebody has a thought on that, this is one of those where, bring it. Let us know. It doesn't have to be a crop grown on the plains or the prairies or in the corn belt. It can be something else that you've read or thought about. You can send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. So, Pete, what do you got on tap this week? What are you up to? You going to spend some time with your butt in that tractor seat maybe a little bit?
Oh, I'm sure hoping, Shaun, but it's got to quit raining. It's got to get dry. We got lucky last night. We only got 1 millimeter, but it still is enough that, things are just too wet at this point. Talking about rain tomorrow, it all depends. There are places where they've been missing the rains. They're going strong. There are other places where they've been in the center of the rainstorm and they're swimming. And whether I'll be in the tractor seat or whether I'll just be twiddling my thumbs, scouting fields and wishing I could be in the tractor seat will entirely depend on what Mother Nature brings over the next day or two.
Great stuff. Hey, Pete, thanks a lot for joining us here today on Agronomic Monday, and we'll chat with you again next week, okay?
Yeah, super. Thanks, Shaun. You have a great week.
And make sure, everybody, you check out this week's episode of Wheat Pete's Word. New episode drops every Wednesday, wherever you get your podcasts. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio with Agronomic Monday. Coming up next, we got a new guest to the show. We're going to be joined by Martin Carr. He's the head of Western Canadian Agronomy with Winfield United Canada. You're listening to RealAg Radio, Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM.
Dad, we missed the window for a PGR in our cereals.
Why didn't you add it to the herbicide?
What?
With Manipulator PGR, we can apply as early as 1 tiller. Just add it to the herbicide, no separate pass.
Don't miss out. Manipulator PGR is proven in wheat, durum, barley, and oats to shorten plants and even out the main stem and tillers. This results in reduced lodging risk, improved harvest efficiency, and increased yield. Talk to your crop protection retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
Hi, I'm Bernard Tobin, host of the Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com. Throughout the year, on the Soybean School, we'll bring you timely agronomic video content from planting to harvest, from the latest agronomic research to the latest in production technology. Check out our massive video library on YouTube, RealAgriculture.com, or download the audio podcast versions wherever you get your podcasts. The Soybean School is brought to you by BASF and Syngenta Canada.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio here on Agronomic Monday. Well, I mentioned at the beginning of the show, we've got a rookie to RealAg Radio here. We're joined right now by our next guest. It is Martin Carr, and he is agronomy manager for Western Canada for Winfield United Canada. Hey, Martin, welcome to the show.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great stuff. So you're based out of Saskatoon. How's the weather there today?
It's raining. That's a good day for everyone, right? We'll take the moisture for sure.
It's a miracle. It's nice to see. I saw there was one person last night that was tweeting and showing like the big pattern. Like, it's, the good part of Western Canada is going to get some rain here in the next 3 days. Drought over. Slow down. Slow down. We got to get the rain.
Yeah.
2, in some of these areas in such a deficit position that we're going to need a little bit more than what we're getting this week, but it's a great start.
Great start, absolutely, right? It's far and it's far too early to start writing things off or suggesting it's going to be bin buster just yet, right? It's still May 6th, so we still got lots of time for sure. But like you said, great start. We've had a little bit of moisture over the last couple of weeks as well, right? So that soil moisture is especially in the top little bit, right? That's enough to get things going and hopefully be on the right start. So I'm optimistic anyways.
I love it. I like it. Yeah. You got to, as growers say to me all the time on this show, you got to be optimistic to be in this business. Okay. So today we're going to talk about the sprayer today. And I know you've been doing some sprayer clinics in different parts of Western Canada. And when I think of sprayer clinics and making decisions about the sprayer, more so than ever before, like nozzle selection is a critical component of that. Whether we are doing a burn down or we are in crop, what is the application? What products are we using? What are we doing? Nozzle selection is critical. So what are some of the things that are in that decision-making process of coming up with the right nozzle to be using for that application?
Yeah, for sure. So, first of all, we will talk about, nozzle life, nozzle calibration, making sure that, the nozzles that you got on your sprayer aren't worn out, right? So, that's definitely something that happens, right? I think a lot of times we see water coming through that nozzle. It looks like it's making a fine pattern, but, is it actually distributing it how it should be? And a lot of times when we've done live calibrations, they're usually pretty old, worn out nozzles. So that's the first thing. But when we're even just picking, if we're now going and getting a new set of nozzles, the one thing I always like to bring up or think about is, what are we actually putting in that sprayer, right? Is it highly systemic, like something like a glyphosate? Is it very much a contact product, right? Where it lands is where it burns, that's where it enters, right? So that might be something like your group 6s, your group 10s, right? Those are products that they generally don't move, and translocate through the plant the same way glyphosate would. And then you have other products that, they are systemic, I'll say. You think about something like a lot of your group 1s, your group 2s, right? They do move throughout the plant, but they aren't like a glyphosate where, it's more about getting the right dosage to the plant. You do still need good coverage for those products to work effectively, right? So that's the biggest thing when we're looking at nozzle selection. First of all, water volume, right? If a label says 5 gallons or 10 gallons, that's a good idea, right? We should be following that. So that'll tell us the color. But even more so than just water volume, we want to now, if something calls for 10 gallons, we want to make the most of that 10 gallons, right? We don't want a bunch of it drifting off target. We also don't want to make a bunch of baseballs coming out of that droplet either, right? So finding that point of, okay, what sort of coverage do we need? Because the coverage requirements for something that's highly systemic is a little different than something like that needs a lot of contact. And then it's, well, what about during tank mix situations, right? Because we shouldn't be spraying things by themselves anymore, right? Multi-mode of action is a huge important piece around managing weed resistance. So then you got to look at law of the minimum, right? And then typically that will drive you towards spraying how the contact needs to be sprayed. Because if you spray a tank mix and only one of those two can be successful, is it truly multi-mode of action anymore? Right? Because multi-mode of action is all about, you've got, if one was resistant to it, the other one could kill it. Well, if it's applied in a way that can't be successful, is it truly multi-mode of action? I would argue probably not, right?
Yeah, and I was just going to ask you about the consequences of, a lot of times we talk about the benefits of using the right nozzle. What's the consequences of not using the right nozzle?
Absolutely. So, if you go with something too fine, right, that can lead to, drift, that can lead to off-target movement, it can lead to evaporation. So, if you're using something that's more of a flat fan style of nozzle, what you could be creating, 30, 40% of that droplet size could be too small to actually hit the target, and you could be losing a lot of product. So your consequence of losing a lot of product, first of all, could be drifting onto the neighbors or into the ditch or doing some damage. The other thing is it's you're losing money, right? Because that product isn't landing where it's supposed to. And then the last consequence is potentially weed escape, right? If you put that product down for it to work, but it's only hitting the plants at a reduced rate, you're not actually getting how much you need down there for it to be effective. You could lose control as well. So those are sort of the multiple things that could happen if you're too small. Then if you go too big, now off target becomes less of an issue. Evaporation has become less of an issue. But again, you start looking at your control. Your coverage would have drastically reduced. So if it's something that's highly systemic, you might get away with it. But even something that's highly systemic, if you go too big, right? If you go to the ultra coarse side of things and you drive through something like a kochia patch, for example, in a 1 square meter kochia patch, how many kochia plants are in there, right? Thousands. Well, if you have an ultra coarse droplet and you spray it over, you might hit 5% of them, 10% of them. So you'd actually just miss, right? So even something that's highly systemic, that still doesn't overly work that effectively, right? So it's about finding that balance. Where's too big, where's too small, and then even within the chemistry is optimizing for each of them.
And what role do adjuvants play in the effect?
Yeah.
We'll talk about that before we wrap up.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we look at adjuvants, so the one on my shirt here, interlock, we talk about lock technology, right? Or lock tech. That would be things like interlock, master lock, and strike lock. What those products are really designed to do is get rid of the driftable fines, but they don't make everything coarse, right? There's different ways you can mitigate drift with adjuvants. One is to thicken the spray solution and make everything bigger, right? That's kind of like going from that flat fan to ultra coarse, right? It makes everything bigger. What we do with interlock and master lock and strike lock, what we've noticed is when you add that to the spray tank, it does get rid of a lot of those fines, but because it's not thickening that spray solution, you're not making an impact on the medium or coarse or very coarse droplets that are going to come out of the tank already, right outside of that droplet. Because no nozzle is going to make every droplet the exact same size, right? You always get a spectrum. But what we're seeing is we get a tighter spectrum when we're using interlock. You get less driftable fines, but you don't make any coarser ones on the other end. So you get a tighter spectrum, more uniform droplet size coming out of the tank. So what is the adjuvant doing there? It's helping get more of the product that you need onto the target.
So it's making the product more effective, essentially, or it makes your application more effective. Not
it makes the application more effective, yeah, because you're not drifting as much. You're not drifting as much away. It's getting to where it needs to go. And that would that essentially has benefits, right? Because it's not you're not losing it.
How do I know? Because I've seen a lot of the different products that are out there. How do I know which one I should be using in which application?
Yeah, so one thing for Winfield United is the amount of time, investment, money we've put into actually researching our products. Right, we have a research facility in River Falls, Wisconsin, and at our innovation center we've got a couple spray chambers. One is a spray analysis system that will profile droplets with 3D nozzles, and we've tested over 800 different nozzle combinations through that facility. So we'll be looking at how the nozzles are going through it, what spectrum of that is coming off of, what is driftable fines, and we do put active ingredients through it because we don't just spray water through our sprayers, right? And a lot of times you're putting your herbicides through that sprayer. It does change what that spray spectrum looks like. And that's something that we've done a lot of at our facilities. We'll test lots of different nozzles, lots of different products, and then adding different adjuvants in there and seeing what impact they make. So and then we also have a wind tunnel. So once we profile it, we can actually test how far these things are drifting. And the wind tunnel that we have is the only one in the world that's like it. And down below, we'll do ground speed winds up to 40 mile an hour. And at the top, it's an aerial chamber, and it'll go up to 160 mile an hour. So we can actually test both ground and aerial and actually measure how far droplets are moving off target with different nozzle combinations.
Wind tunnel. It's like we're running a race team. Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Same concept, same reason. So very, looking at aerodynamic and racing, but here we're looking at drift. So very, very cool stuff. Hey, yeah. Martin, this has been fantastic. We got to get you back on the show sometime very soon here. So maybe once that crop gets out of the ground, we'll catch up again. So really appreciate you joining us here today on RealAg Radio.
Right on. Thanks for having me.
Awesome stuff. That is Martin Carr. He is the agronomy manager for Western Canada, based out of Saskatoon with Winfield United Canada. Okay, when we come back on RealAg Radio, we're going to get to the top ag news stories of the day right after this.
These days, the Canadian federal government and multinational food companies are investing hundreds of millions to support BMPs on Canadian farms. But here's the thing, nobody knows your operation better than you do. These programs need your feedback on what you want and what you need. The conversation is happening on Facebook Messenger. Do you have 5 to 10 minutes to chat today? Visit getyourvoiceheard.ca. Your feedback matters.
I'm Lindsay Smith from RealAgriculture.com. Join me Monday nights for The Agronomist, a 1-hour live and interactive show broadcast across YouTube, Facebook, and X. Monday nights at 8 p.m. Eastern, I host expert agronomists from all over the country to give you answers to some of the toughest agronomic questions. Join us live or catch the replay Tuesday morning. That's The Agronomist with me, Lindsay Smith, Monday nights live at 8 p.m. Eastern.
It's now time for the top ag news stories of the day here on RealAg Radio. Up first, interesting piece of analysis from Farm Credit Canada. Now, they of course do their land value report every year, but what they're also doing is looking at cash rents relative to land values. And I like this. This is interesting because it sort of shows you nationally and provincially which areas are tracking the cash rents very closely to the values. And we've seen, of course, land values have been going up across the country. But so what they do is they look at the cash rental rate per acre divided by the value of the farmland per acre. That gives you a percentage. Okay, so for example, nationally in 2023, that ratio was 2.52%. So the cash rent value is 2.52% of the land value. In 2022, it was 2.55, so a slight decrease. Saskatchewan, of course, remember, 2023, one of the greatest leaps forward in terms of land values in comparison to its peer provinces. If we look at the cash rent, it was 3.1%. It was also 3.1% in 2022. So even with the increase in land values in Saskatchewan, the rental rates have tracked, okay? If you look at Alberta, it's 2.4% in 2023. In 2022, it was 2.6. Manitoba, 2.4, also 2.4 a year ago. So tracking very nicely, similar to Saskatchewan. In Ontario, 1.25%, which is down from 1.4% in 2022. Quebec, same both years, 23 and 22, at 1.5%. PEI, one of the highest, well, it is the highest at 4.35% in 2023. It was 4.35% as well in 22. Now, the number there is larger because, of course, the potato acre, as a percentage of the total land, you're going to see a higher cash rent for potatoes. So, and quite wide ranges too, right? So in a province like, for example, PEI, the max was 6.7. and the minimum was 1.9, so definitely a fluctuation there on the acres. Tyson exceeded Wall Street's expectations for second quarter profit, benefiting from the closure of some chicken processing plants to cut costs. The company's shares rose by 3.5% in pre-market trading, continuing a year-to-date increase of over 15%. Tyson has shut down 6 U.S. chicken plants since last year, alongside layoffs and plans to close a pork plant aimed at cost reduction. Warren Buffett had his big address there on the weekend, and interesting. He said taxes are likely to rise as lawmakers look to narrow the federal deficit. The Berkshire Hathaway chair and CEO, speaking Saturday at the company's annual meeting in Omaha, sidestepped directly, commenting on the partisan fight over corporate taxes taking shape in the U.S. But he said his company will pay whatever the rate is, whether the current 21% or something higher. He was quoted as saying, with present fiscal policies, I think that something has to give. Higher taxes are quite likely, and if the government wants to take greater share of your income or mine or Berkshire Hathaway's, they can do it, and they may decide that someday they don't want the fiscal deficit to be this large. So that's this discussion is happening in Canada. Of course, it's also happening in the U.S. And or instead of raising taxes, maybe cut some spending. There's that side of the talk too. I'm surprised that wasn't more part of the narrative there at the Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. European central banks, so the European Central Bank, I should say, not plural, is increasingly considering a rate cut in June as services inflation could begin to decrease. According to chief economist Philip Lane, who mentioned to a Spanish newspaper that both the April inflation estimate for the euro area and the first quarter GDP figures boost his confidence that that inflation will return to the target level in due time. He emphasized the ECB's ongoing focus on services to ensure that disinflation continues. And this is a little bit different from what we're hearing in the U.S., where there's still, I don't know if it's a growing narrative, but definitely a narrative there that we can actually see a rate hike in the U.S. The U.S. economy has been extremely resilient. Last week, the Federal Reserve held their rate. Rising climate volatility is fueling demand for weather derivatives. So companies and investors are increasingly recognizing the significance of meteorological risks and are turning to specialized area of Wall Street to mitigate them. The escalating unpredictability of climate patterns is driving the need for weather derivatives, which offer protection against weather-related financial losses. According to the CME, the average trading volume for such derivatives listed products surged by over 260% in 2023, indicating a growing demand. The market for these derivatives could potentially be valued as high as $25 billion based on notional value, showcasing the substantial scale of this niche yet crucial sector in finance. So I wonder what one contract is worth. I'm going to look into this, weather derivatives. So, and if has anybody out there in the audience actually used a weather derivative? Have you bought a call or a put or been on the others or wrote any of those options when it comes to weather derivatives? This seems like a natural for farmers to use as a as a risk mitigation strategy. I wonder what the cost is, the premium. You think there would be, well, my first gut reaction is high, but need to look more into this. This is something we can see a little bit more in terms of another way to manage risk on the farm. And weather definitely a factor when it comes to agricultural output. China's yuan has fallen 6% from a recent peak compared with a basket of its major trading partners' currencies, which has helped turbocharge the country's export boom. The real effective exchange rate for the yuan, which adjusts for inflation disparities between China and its major trading partners, has reverted to its 2014 level, marking the end of a decade-long trend of appreciation. This depreciation of China's currency is boosting the country's overseas sales significantly, potentially at the expense of other exporting nations. The situation underscores the substantial influence that currency values wield over the international flow of goods in trade. I should say, having a hard time getting it out. But it also does make, if the yuan decreases in value, especially compared to the U.S. dollar, it also makes imports of some U.S. products like our commodities, corn, soybeans, canola, more expensive. So there is that. That'll definitely have an impact on trade flows as well. And sticking to China, the European Union is urging China to keep agriculture out of the escalating trade disputes, emphasizing the need to protect the agricultural sector from tensions arising in industries like renewable energy and electric vehicles. The Financial Times reports the EU has launched investigations into Chinese suppliers allegedly violating foreign subsidy regulations, aiming to address distortions favoring third world companies in the EU. EU Agricultural Commissioner, Janez Wojciechowski stressed the importance of safeguarding agriculture as a strategic sector separate from other trade disputes. Despite being China's second largest trading partner, the EU has raised concerns over industrial overcapacity and trade imbalances. If you have any feedback on today's show, we would love to hear from you, of course. Send me that email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks, everybody, for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And, of course, we'll chat again tomorrow. Cheers, everybody.